jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Alrighty, and we're back. And
Cool,
here's
cool.
specialist of the specialist guests, Liam O'Donnell from Cinepunx Podcast Network and Roughneck T-Shirt Company. Rough Cut T-Shirt Company. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. How are you doing?
I've been better, but I'm enjoying talking about subjects that fascinate people. So, there's that. And here in one of many, multiple franchise breakdowns, I just decided, hey, let's talk about one of the most cult franchises. And I never tackle a movie, just one movie. I just say, hey, if there's multiple of these movies, we're gonna take them all down one at a time, just in one giant episode, like we did with Hellraiser 1 through 10. So.
Well, I'm glad I didn't sign up for that one. Jesus.
I would never wish that upon anyone. And everyone else, I just had to end it earlier. I could tell everyone was just like, this is dragging. Fuck this movie series. And Liam O'Donnell, you have struggled through multiple bad movies that the beloved actor Eric Roberts has done. So I just figured.
It's true. It's true.
I'm surprised he wasn't in any of those. I'm surprised he's not in this franchise that we're discussing today. Oh man, but there's plenty of them who are. We're both very politically savvy and like to talk about how social issues arise in movies and whether it makes them date poorly or only makes them more relevant in a particular saga. And this movie in general, this timing could not have been better or worse. It encompasses all of anything wrong with any kind of society. So what was your introduction to this film series?
I saw Maniac Cop 2 before I saw Maniac Cop. It was one of those things that would play on cable, and I just would catch it. And in fact, the real shock for me was I didn't see Maniac Cop probably till I was in my 20s, and I couldn't believe how human. I mean, let's be clear. Zadar kind of looks like a monster from the get prior to makeup.
Yes.
Just, no disrespect. I'm just saying that jawline is part of what makes him so intimidating. But I was so used to seeing Maniac Cop 2 on cable that when I finally sat down and paid attention to Maniac Cop, I was like, wow. Before I saw it, I had no idea it was a Bruce Campbell movie. I had no clue it was a Bruce Campbell movie. I really, to me, one of the funniest things about Maniac Cop 2 is how Bruce Campbell just immediately dies. And I always thought, like, oh, that's weird. What a weird cameo for Bruce Campbell. But again, I was a kid. I didn't know. And, for people to know, I was a kid before there was really internet. So I couldn't just go look up on IMDb like, ooh, what's going on with the Maniac Cop movies? I just never had any exposure to the first one. When I finally saw the first one, it was kind of a big revelation for me, that, he's not just immediately a giant zombie cop, and B, how much Bruce Campbell is in it. Like, it's just so seriously a Bruce Campbell movie, and it's different than really the only roles I feel like a lot of people know Bruce Campbell for, which is obviously Ash and a little bit of that Briscoe County Jr. That's about it when it comes to Bruce, and so it was interesting to see him in a different role.
Exactly. Nowadays, you would probably mention Burn Notice and some of the other shows he had recurring
Sure.
roles on. But yeah, I mean, and for all, he knows that his fan base, much like any of these other B movie stars, eat up, anything he's in because he's often the best part. But I mean, it's kind of interesting how compared to other movies that he's mentioned in his book, Tales from the Chin or whatever, that, he didn't like the movie, yada, yada. But it's just kind of interesting how you look at this and it's like, he's really good in this. I would say this is one of his best movies, but it's kind of funny how much like it's kind of the same thing with even just Evil Dead or the creator of this franchise, Larry Cohen in general. Based on who you talk to, some people are going to say, "Oh, it's so bad, it's good," or it's good. It just happens to be a B picture, and it's very annoying because you pretty much have to figure out what kind of crowd you're with just from the get go, and it's interesting how these played in the drive-ins. The first one was absolutely. We're going to just talk about the overview of these movies, just for those listening, just because these movies literally do just flow directly into one another. That we just got to talk about an overview. So, yeah, the first one becomes a cult hit after getting just critically bashed and picks up on the cable charts. Part 2, is a vid mark, before they were Lionsgate release, and gets played endlessly on the HBO stations, and then just kind of stops. And Part 3, just gets premieres straight onto HBO. It's not one of their movies; it just premieres on there, and it's very interesting how, like you say, how there's a lot of B movie, who's who of that expertise, as well as it's kind of also just extremely different from other kind of movies by these guys, because Cohen, he often does kind of throwbacks as well as just other different kinds of movies that are horror or crime related or action for that matter, and this one is just very different from his kind of usual style, and even William Lustig to some degree. I mean, this is the guy who did Relentless and 1980s Maniac, and yet it's a whole different breed altogether. So it's kind of interesting how these different minds just conjured this up. And even just with the police station massacres, I hardly feel like it's even just a nod to the Terminator. I feel like it's even just it's trying to raise the bar in a way, if that makes sense, without being insultingly derivative. Like there's inspired by, and then it's just kind of like, oh, you thought you could do this, oh, we're gonna amp it up and kind of make it still work for its own thing that it's doing. So I'll let you take
I think that's fair. I think but I do think that even the creation of Maniac Cop is a bit of a cash grab. It's like, Maniac did its own thing. RoboCop is a movie that people seem to care about. Let's just smush together two things and make a movie that we think will do well just because it's got cop in the name.
Absolutely.
It is interesting how to me, the series kind of loses the thread. Like, I think a lot of people I know do, like even today I was tweeting about this movie, specifically about the third one, because I hadn't watched it in a really long time, and I was kind of shocked by it a little bit, but we'll get to that. But for a lot of people, they do see these movies as one piece, it's not really worth differentiating between Maniac Cop, Maniac Cop 2, Maniac Cop 3. It's all just this like linear story. But I really feel like Maniac Cop, for me, still feels like an anti-cop movie. Like the entire thesis seems to be, what's terrifying? Police. Police are terrifying, actually. And the whole movie, it's like you've got oh, my brain. Tom Atkins. He seems pretty good at his job. You got
Stop it.
you got Bruce Campbell. He's, I guess, okay at what he's doing. He's at least not a monster, from what I can tell. And then all the other cops are bad. And the Zadar character, whatever his name is in the movie, what is it? Cordell. Cordell is just the worst of the worst. But none of these cops are particularly endearing. At no point are you like, ugh, man, these poor cops, they're under attack by the crazy cops. No. These seem like bad dudes all the way through. And really, Atkins and Campbell, who themselves are not exactly like heroes in some ways, are just the outliers by not being, jerk offs, and so
Yeah, Campbell's, even though they don't show him doing anything, they always say, "Oh, you've already been under review," all that shit, and so you could definitely have pictured him, when he was a rookie as a patrol officer, he could have definitely just beaten someone near senseless without reading their rights. He is that kind of guy who probably
Sure.
fucked up at one. He definitely fucked up at one point in his career, and yeah, we can curse. I'm just, some of my guests are hesitant to do that. I'm just saying, yeah, you take away the undead aspect, it's a Serpico type movie. You take away even that,
Right.
it's a victim movie. But like you say, it's kind of satirical without be overdoing it. Like some people have been good at satire. Like Paul Verhoeven is really good at it on a good day, really awful at it on a lesser day, and Cohen and just kind of just lets it speak for itself. But within minutes, you know that you're not just watching some drive-in trash. It's some people have referred to this as enjoyable trash. Some of it just say it's actually a very well done B movie. I'm kind of just the latter. I'm just like, because I've had my share of just slashers and all this other things, and it's a trippy movie, but it's also a tricky movie. You kind of welcome the tricks that's playing on you because you know that other than the third one, everyone's comfortable doing what they're doing, as opposed to, I really don't know what to expect, and I'm not going to watch this endless amounts of time just to make sense of this.
Sure.
It's not that kind of movie. This is years before Dogma 95 style and all the other stuff is just making us question the line between art or entertainment or just flat out. I can't even, describe it as a movie. It doesn't have any description, and that we can't even decide if it's good or bad. It's just this is the kind of movie that is like fortunately, it just had a reliable enough cinematographer. They're able to make use of the low budget and make it look bigger, so it's got that working for it. And then it, like you say, it has all these social themes. And this is years before we have all the Nazis saying, "Oh, that's too politically correct," and years before other people are like, I just don't find this movie entertaining because it just reminds me of today's bullshit. And this one, regardless of what era it would have been made in, it does it in a way where it's just like, okay, we're tackling some social issues, and at the end of the day, this is all just entertainment, but we're at least making you just kind of, we're just making it be part of the plot twist, for lack of a better description.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, this is years before we're just having, any of Trump's minions and Russian bots just go on Twitter and just start arguments with people before a movie is even fucking out, like they did with The Hunt and all the other stuff. It's like, oh my god, that movie was a satire too. And if you have a problem being ridiculed, no fair going around claiming like all these other people and activists are hypocrites when you're still, again, breeding a different kind of Hitler. And yeah, man, many of these cops are pretty much, some of them act like Nazis, some of them act like just, doing my job, I don't give a shit. And it's interesting how half the time, they just they always ends on a cliffhanger, and wisely on the third one, they kind of play it up, but it's still subtly. And it was apparently finished without the creator's consent, and to be fair,
Well, yeah,
seen
I mean,
all,
the William Lustig work print was only 52 minutes, so he didn't really have a fucking movie, and so they had to have someone come in, and I don't know, I honestly don't know what the fuck he was thinking. I mean, maybe just the production wasn't going well overall, but the idea like that it was finished when it wasn't even close, and that's why you get all those crazy cuts in of Maniac Cop 2, because they had to give it to this editor to sort of like stretch it out to make it a feature-length film. So
yeah,
and
unfortunately, it
Go
gets
ahead.
very action-packed near the end.
Yeah.
And yet, in the last 10 minutes, I'm kind of just like, I still want this movie to just be fucking done and over. I know that he's gonna just burn him
Right.
up, and he's not gonna really be dead. But I
Well,
want.
I think
Robert Davi's
Lustig gets underrated as an action director, really. Like, as much as I kind of hate Maniac Cop 2 in a lot of ways, because of like the sort of turn it makes from the first one. But if
Yeah.
you just take it on like a technical aspect, like there's some for the budget level, there's some great action, and Lustig still hails Maniac Cop 2 as like his masterpiece. Like he really thinks he did something with that movie, and it, on a purely technical level, I think he did, and I think I think it was someplace he was going. Like if you think about like Vigilante, like clearly like urban action was something he was already motivated by. Excuse me, but but he but for me personally, it just gets on my nerves that we're going to take this guy who was such a consummate villain and then suddenly redeem him now. Like we've turned him into a zombie, and now the zombie's actually not so bad.
That's a fair point.
I don't love that. I think it kind of makes the first one make less sense, and then by the third one, I think we're actually seeing some of his best action sequences. The car chase where Zadar is on fire holding onto the car.
Yeah.
All of that is sick. That's actually great. But
even
all the
before
stuff
that, when Claudia Christian's detective is holding on to the side of the door for the, this is years before Babylon 5, and she's actually a year, and she's just holding on. She's like, who the fuck is trying to kill me? I just got done talking to a witness.
Yeah. The whole idea that like now suddenly it's this other plot with the offshoot of Santeria, and then we're gonna exchange souls. It's so it doesn't even, and I'm kind of a Larry Cohen fan. It doesn't even feel like a Larry Cohen movie. It feels like Larry Cohen just gave up on this script, and then Lustig literally gave up on set and walked off. So I don't know. It's as much as there's parts of this movie that I think are like surprisingly good, it makes the whole thing kind of fall apart. Whereas, Maniac Cop, you were saying, it's a surprisingly good B movie. I think it's really solid, man. Like I get the parts of it are, I guess, kind of stupid. And I will say all three of these movies get a little on my nerves in the whole let's mostly shoot in LA and pretend this is a New York film. They all have the same shot from the same graveyard, and then a couple of New York. The worst is Maniac Cop 3. Maniac Cop 3 never even tries to look like New York except for that graveyard sequence at the beginning. It's all in LA. Maniac Cop 2 is mostly in LA.
Yeah,
there's a little more
do
New York
a lot of great news and everything to kind of make it be like, this is gritty. This is Prince of the City, right? Get it?
I mean, you literally, there's parts of Maniac Cop 2 where I'm like, are those palm trees? I think those are palm trees. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. But that aside, I think Maniac Cop mostly works. Like it works as an entertaining film for me, even if it has some slow bits. But it also works in the idea that like it's tapping into a real fear. I think a real key to the film is when our man Atkins is in the bar, he's getting drunk, the TV's on, it's a news report, and there's a young black kid is talking about being afraid of the cops because they beat up his friends and they shoot people and whatever. And I think that kind of functions as a key for the rest of the film to sort of get a feel for like the anxieties that people were feeling. And then Maniac Cop 2, it's like suddenly they're like, oh, never mind, cops are pretty good actually. Like even though there's still a feeling that the system is bad, right? That's the theme that goes through all three films, is that the system isn't good, and you get that actually pretty strongly in Maniac Cop 3 when it's like, how do the cops do their jobs when these horrible paparazzi, a la what's his name in Nightcrawler, you know what I mean? Like these dudes sort of are feeding off of the actual tragedy there, and the cops, like, they might not be great at their jobs, but they're really just responding to a system that is unjust. And that's, I guess, slightly compelling. But in Maniac Cop 2, it really doesn't work as well for me. Whereas Maniac Cop 3, there's a little bit of like a tragic whatever. And it is funny that our main hero guy also likes to shoot people a lot. Everyone he could shoot in Maniac Cop 3, he tries to shoot them at least 10 times. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I definitely concur on many of those points. It's definitely repetitive, so definitely don't watch these like I did back to back. It's gonna be repetitive as fuck. But, I'm just more of I just look for the bigger side. What is the movie going for? I never feel like it goes into Chucky territory where it's like, oh, give me a fucking break. It's just it's never ending chaos. There needs to be a stopping point. there's enough breathing moments for me to where I'm not bored, but I just have a moment to prep for the next inevitably chaotic moment. You made so many good points. I feel like with part 2, it wouldn't have worked in any other franchise, like especially a mainstream one that would have just become just so dense, but yet not organized. Like, look at every other superhero franchise for that matter. It's just they don't know how to juggle between giving, some me time to all the actors and then just making sure the plot actually makes sense in the editing room. And with part 2, I just kind of feel like you say, it's just Cohen and Lustig, two totally different minds working together. Inevitably, their visions just kind of becomes a whole different type of movie than what we're used to. At the same time, I feel like there's just enough ironies that at the end of the day, this is just one very explosive milkshake of a ride of a movie, and it's just kind of it's like the science experiment that just keeps exploding in the lab. It just goes in waves before inevitably you just say, okay, enough already. I'm finally turning off the boob tube. I'm finally turning off the TV. And that's that. I've seen enough. Yeah, like you say, they're all rough around the edges. They all have moments that are worth seeing, and yet at the same time, it's like if you want to just really, really dissect it, that there's a reason these aren't ever in like the top, action horror mashup franchises of all time. And yet, strangely enough, like they kind of somehow flow slightly better than like any other franchise that was mainstream and that just got off the tracks and eventually, like I already mentioned Hellraiser, but even Terminator in a way, it's like that, just not having the magic touch, not having the people who created it involved, it just shows and sticks out like a sore thumb. And it's kind of funny. Part 3 in a way kind of feels like a Die Hard in a hospital movie, and it's just so funny because they got Special Agent Johnson himself, Robert Davi, as the hero, and it's kind of wild how he's playing a character we root for, and I know he's politically outspoken and yet seems like a nice guy on a good day. So it's just it's another interesting predicament, just seeing not only just separating the actor from the art, but also just the kind of role he's typecast in playing, which is often the angry authority figure. And strangely enough, in other movies I've seen him in, he just wasn't easy to root for. He was just often an anti-hero or a contradicting prick, and here he's just kind of, like you say, a guy who otherwise would be a bad cop on a good day, and here he's having to actually use his excessive force against an unstoppable force. So it's like the vision is more interesting to talk about after the fact, and whether or not you're going to actually enjoy the actual movie, that's a whole other argument, because like you say, is like these are repetitive, and yet it's like there's, before you know it, 90 minutes has gone by and you're like, holy shit, that flew by, and yet I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there really is some like really well done action in Maniac Cop 2. I just don't find it as charming, you know what I mean, as the first one.
No, not charming at all.
But like the technicality, I mean, Zadar on fire in the prison, grabbing the dude, jumping through the wall. I mean, he's on fire so long you think, is he dead? Has he died? Is that stuntman dead? What's happened? You know what I mean? Like, it is, there's a lot of stuff like that, falling through the bus. There's just a lot in Maniac Cop 2 that's very exciting. But there's just, I don't know. I think it would have been ridiculous to have Bruce Campbell in it, I think. However, he's just an endearing actor. You know what I mean? Like he there's no one in part 2 that I care about the way I care about Bruce Campbell. Yeah. Same for part 3, you know what I mean? Although there's, some fun people in part 3, it's just hard for me to care in the same way.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
As Needed and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time.
Ah.
Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Ah, yes.
I am the master storyteller of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out The Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
No, don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we're going to end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinepunx. Cinepunx. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be
could
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
It's time, let's check our queue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-liner plot holes and gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy. At eilfm.podbean.com.
We now continue with our program.
I think that's a very big point, and it's also kind of both a charm and a flaw of both Lustig and Cohen's work. They often have characters that are good actors just giving lots of exposition filled dialogue, and the movies often go fast enough that, like you say, and before you know it's over and you're like, yeah, I didn't really care about anybody, did I? But I was entertained. So
I mean, don't get me wrong, seeing Jackie Earle Haley as a crazy drug addict shooting everything, like, that's fun. That's not a bad thing. Or
right,
seeing,
we root for his comeuppance.
yeah, or seeing Robert Forster as this like weird doctor, like, that's cool. But there's just no, I'm
like
not,
you say, no connection. Is like, okay, whoop, they died. What the hell?
I mean, it was very surprising to see Robert Davi as like kind of an action guy. Like, he doesn't do a lot of stunts, but he does a couple of things that are kind of neat looking, like, but
yeah. I'm so used to seeing him be a guy who just often comes up and shoots someone, but it's mostly as a bad guy, like License to Kill. So, like you say, I mean, everybody just kind of just comes in, does their thing, gives it a little more respectability, yet at the same time, like you say, when you see him dead in the next scene, you're not surprised. It's like, yeah, they're... So, it's both... It's like, this is a infamous movie that's elevated into a more entertaining level. I just can't think of any other better way to put it, because, I mean, had this been in anyone else's hands, it would have totally just been, 2 a.m. trash that you're just like, yeah, I'm turning this crap off. It was fun laughing at it, but I can only take so much punishment, And here with this, it's just kind of like, still there's a lot of the man moments, and yet there's somehow there's enough self-awareness, and yet a dedication to just making sure the movie just flows fast and just kind of doesn't, like, it still overstays its welcome, but it doesn't try and just feel just too one-dimensional in the world that is creating. It's kind of having fun creating its world at the same time, and yet it's also too much inevitably. So, I mean, there's this is a big giant B is for B movie. In some ways, they could be C movies. I'm sure B movie addicts might even give them an A for effort. So, I mean, this is a very unusual quandary. It's like, basically, if you had to recommend these to people, I definitely would recommend them to fans of the Terminator franchise, because it does have a similar kind of score that kind of tells whatever little story there is, but at the same time, there's might be people who still just hate this and just can't separate it from all the other trash they've seen. So, where would you put these between other franchises that are similar to this kind of?
I mean, I think that Maniac Cop would hold up a lot more if it was a one-off. I think that a lot of people love Maniac Cop 1 and 2. I don't know anyone who loves 3. I guess my friend Austin said he thought it was pretty good. I think for the most part, Maniac Cop 3 is just a bit of a letdown. So I think if you're taking the franchise as a whole, it's hard not to see that as kind of a, I don't know,
out of steam. I mean, it's interesting at the beginning, and like you say, just the second half is just like it's going off the train tracks. third time's the charm, but this time it's just too much. So
I think that I think though Maniac Cop stands up. I like Lustig as a director. You know, he's not perfect, but he's done some things I really like. And I think there's just even the parts of Maniac Cop that are kind of goofy or maybe don't entirely work. I still think they're cool. I don't know and maybe there's a bit of nostalgia there, but
it helps that
technically
it starts off with an investigation, so
Right.
you're just kind of ready for just hold on. This is not any kind of typical movie. So
well,
I'm
and
ready-
Tom Atkins. I mean, the combo of Bruce Campbell and Tom Atkins is just a power punch for any sort of lesser film. You know that it's going to
Totally.
elevate it a little bit.
Richard Roundtree, even it just
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's like you got these genre vets who are used to playing these kind of roles, and it's like, okay.
I guess the thing for me with 2 is that if someone wants a mindless action movie, I think 2 does pretty good. You know, there's the zombie version of the Maniac Cop. We do get a lot more Terminator sequences. There is a lot more of him just crashing through things and shooting people up. And I feel like that would get old. Like, I think to me that's like not that entertaining. But on the other hand, considering it's not like Lustig had millions and millions of dollars. He had way more money than he had for Maniac Cop, but he did not have unlimited funds. And I think he does do a lot with the money he has. So, you know, some respect there for sure. But I think that if you're someone who is more of a horror person and less of a action sort of person, I think Maniac Cop 2 might not be as exciting. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I totally know, because they all have elements. Is like, okay, I'll watch it at least once, and the often I guess the shortcomings are, I mean, part 1 just kind of takes a while to build up, and part 2 kind of in between kind of has to stretch it out, and then part 3 really suffers from stretching it out. So I think also, like you say, part of the runtime that's complicated, and I guess maybe why you could say why everyone had no trouble getting into them is because half the runtime of the sequels is the recap from the beginning, and part 1's runtime is just setting it all up before they unleash the nonstop chaos. So I guess you could say the biggest issue is whether or not you were in the 80s versus today, and you're just now getting to these. You're definitely going to have different perspective from that standpoint. I guess overall, I guess they really do work well because they're anti-cop movies, and they're not trying to preach to the choir, and yet at the same time they're also not trying to be message movies that are heavy-handed or anything. They're just like, here's what happens. We're gonna have these guys. They're basically eating each other alive, or hunting each other, and how convenient that it's a undead, zombie, and what we later find out, awakened by voodoo cop that basically is a killer who gets off on killing other bad people as well as bad cops. So if it's takes this supernatural force to tear our entire already, cutthroat department finally apart, then something is truly wrong. And I guess the biggest, both a pro and a con also of this movie, it's funny how I just keep going back to that, is how there's no hope in these movies, and yet you kind of want to morbidly see what happens. It's like, what's going to happen next? Because obviously no one's going to be able to explain all these dead bodies that are in the fucking department. No one can justify anything. No one can even say, tell good cop from bad cop. Now everyone's so distracted with, trying to stop this unkillable zombie cop that everybody's just pretty much just beside themselves. It's like, yeah, we'll review the whole department again next year, but really, no, we won't. We're just gonna just have more paperwork to do that we'll eventually get to, or won't at all.
I will say it's a little strange that Maniac Cop 3, that everyone's just sort of accepted all the crazy shit that happened in part 2, and it hasn't like changed the world at all. Like, people aren't running around going, "Did you hear there was an undead cop doing
Right.
stuff?" they just know, like the line where he's like, I've just been interested in this occult stuff since all that Cordola stuff went down. You're like, wait, they all know? Like, they all know that this, whenever you have a sequel to something like this, there's always an excuse as to why everyone doesn't now have their entire world shattered because supernatural is real. And in this movie, they're just kind of like, yeah, they know, it's fine. Like, oh,
I don't
okay.
know that they accept it, but like you say, they could have had a little extra backstories, like how's the world taking this? Because I guess that's why they set a lot of it at night. No one has any time. Everyone's already sleep deprived, and they don't really know how to make sense of any of this mayhem. So they're just
I guess he just seems entirely comfortable with the idea. There's not even it doesn't feel like there's a moment where our main guy is like, wow, this is all crazy. There's like magic and undead people. He's just like, yeah, this is how it is. That's weird. It's a little weird.
Yeah, he's especially weird. He just kind of just goes along with this. Like, no, I think you need to reevaluate yourself because this is not normal. None of this is normal. What makes it even weirder, I guess, is Part 3's an origin story, and it's like it's cool, and at the same time, it's like a little too late. You should have just explained that in Part 2, if anything. Maybe in Part 1. I don't know. Maybe just even just a simple shot at the place, and we would have known. We could have been playing around. Oh, is this guy the product of this voodoo? Just hint at it as opposed to just give it all away. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than I wasn't surprised that Larry Cohen ends up working with the great Sidney Lumet on Guilty as Sin. So I'm sure he saw one of these movies and said, "Hey, how about he write a courtroom thriller I'm working on?" So, like you say, it's that they're all messy, and yet Part 1 is just kind of cool from a low budget standpoint. Part 2, I guess, had like 2 million more, but yet is still kind of just showing how to make they're great examples of how to make a movie on a limited budget, and yet at the same time show how you can get creatively kind of astrayed after a while. So I mean, I would take these all with a grain of salt, honestly. I mean, they could have been so much worse, and yet there's still some shit in there that's takes some treading through to get to the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just glad that there wasn't a versus movie or any other stuff. In pop culture, it's not been surprising that every once in a while they've referenced these on animated cartoons. I'm sure South Park brought them up in at least one episode. There's got to be some Adult Swim parody. The title character is actually a playable character in this new independently made horror app game where you can play as various horror characters, and he's one of the playable characters you can play as. So it's like, okay, cool to see some cult fandom. I'm not sure who would want to play as him necessarily, but I wouldn't mind. Although, like you say, it'd be kind of bothersome because this guy is kind of a pot kettle black kind of character.
I don't know.
Killer,
I mean,
preying on other killers who's pretending to be a cop who's killing other cops who, as well as bad cops. So
I think when you're in a video game, though, just the idea that you get to go around and just murder everyone without really getting too much, damage against yourself. I'm sure a lot of people would like that just for the fun of it. But, I think it would be interesting to play a mystery game as Bruce Campbell where you're trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
There you go. You know what? Sam Raimi still seems to have some power. So could he team up with Lustig and just make Maniac Cop part of the Ash universe since they've done so many Evil Dead games, video games?
Who knows?
I think it would work better if the Maniac Cop was like a villain and Campbell got to play as both his cop character and his Ash character, and they're both teaming up saying, "Who the hell are you?" "Oh, I'll tell you who I am. I'm Ash. I'm going to help you, your punk ass, fight this asshole." But yeah, apparently there's been an HBO show in the works. I don't think it'll ever take off, really. And if it does, they're going to have to pretty much just go with a whole different style, much like this upcoming Hellraiser show, because, I mean, this is, like you said before, this is a premise that's already been done to death, pun intended. And it's at this point, you both need a different style, and you need something to just kind of just strip away that it's become formulaic. So I'm not going to hold out my breath for it. It might just be a in development project that never gets realized. And at the same time, I mean, I need something new to watch because I'm just sick of just every other show just trying to be marketed as being similar to this show. It used to be a show was just word of mouth. Oh, you should really tune into this show that they've been, broadcasting and promoting lately. And instead of, I miss it back when you rented VHS tapes from the library or you waited to get the whole DVD set and, praise came that way. Now markets are just so hungry for, income that everybody's got to still the other's audience, and it's like that's getting really lame.
Yeah, I don't try to navigate the TV landscape too much, I wait till
and you're not
it's
alone.
Something.
Yeah,
I wait till something is really exciting, like in advance, like, oh, I heard about that, whatever. Or if people I trust tell me, like, you should check this out. But there's so much TV happening all the time. I feel like I can't keep current. I haven't even finished the stuff that I already kind of like. So.
Yeah, I definitely this year during Corona, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to catch up on the shit I've been trying to finish before I start anything new. That went well. And then pretty much if there was a show I was unsure of, I just would skip around through it. And I pretty much know from the beginning of the episode whether I want to even watch any of all the episodes. Like, okay, the show I'm not the most invested in, but kind of still want to know a little bit about, I'm just going to watch the beginning. I'm going to watch the middle episodes, and I'm going to watch the end. Or I'm just not going to watch any of it at all because it's just already the pilot and the first 3 episodes were just ass. And like you say, everybody's getting so sick of just having to take a chance that the show won't be canceled or builds up over time. So it's just easier to do a 90-minute movie. And having done some independent filmmaking, I always have to just put myself aside and say, what about this movie will stand out? Because the only thing I don't want to do, and that other indie filmmakers seem to not get, is make a movie and make it stand out. And most people think by standing out, you got to imitate. This movie, for going back to this movie, it kind of imitates, but it stands out both in its imitation and comfortable doing its own shit. So it's a rarity. It's a total rarity for better or worse. And
like a lot of exploitation stuff, it was definitely conceived as a cash in. It was definitely like opportunistic. Like, this seems to be something that people are stoked on. Let's just make it happen.
We'll play 2 weeks in a theater. And
sometimes there's an alchemy to that still produces something cool that you are surprised like has legs. Now, this didn't have huge legs. Like, I wouldn't guess that this influenced a ton of other movies, but people are still interested in it. They still talk about it. It's still people still want to get the Blu-ray, so to speak. So it may not have been a titan of horror, but it has its fans, and I think that's not insignificant,
And that's what's so wild is like they all were like the Blu-rays were released by Vinegar Syndrome, so this is also because it's so low budget. Everybody's seen it out there in some fashion. You can even, if you want, still find all the movies up on YouTube. So I mean, it's just interesting how it's just this low budget, it's this talked about, and yet it hasn't. No one can remember the last time it played on a cable TV spectrum in any capacity. I definitely don't ever recall this being on Sci-Fi Channel or anything for that matter. And so I guess you could say there's just enough word of mouth. People have just talked about it, shown it at parties, and it's been a junky yet somewhat entertaining kind of capacity that it just got blabbed about, and eventually it found its way. Here's a personal story. I'm still good friends with Robert Zadar's recurring co-star Joe Estevez, younger twin brother of not twin necessarily, but younger brother of Joe Martin Sheen and uncle of Emilio and Charlie. He starred in a bunch of B to Z grade movies with Zadar, and I had to give him my condolences when I found out Zadar had actually passed away. And it's interesting how, like you say, he's known for these movies, yet, you know, a year later after this first movie, he ends up, actually the same year, no, I take it back. It is a year after he ends up playing Face in Tango and Cash, and that role actually, you know, he's remembered because the role inhibits his physical capacity as well as he gets some actual speaking. Here in these movies, he doesn't even fucking talk, yet he inhibits the role all the same. So it's an interesting quandary. He's definitely one of those who was pretty much regulated to just starring in shit for, you know, straight to TV or video, which is kind of a shame because I don't like to, you know, no one should be prohibited from doing what they want to do because of their physical capacity. Yet at the same time, you know, he kind of just created his own kind of fandom because of these unusual movies he was in and lesser garbage. But also at the same time, I mean, I actually heard stories about how people would actually tease him and be very mean to him at conventions. So it's kind of tragic because I feel like this movie made his career, yet at the same time really ruined it. Any opportunity to do better or get any offer that he would be proud of. It's just like,
I mean, I feel like that's a pretty common story with a lot of horror, though, right? Is that, you know, for so many people, it was both the place where their life started and their career ended, you know? So,
correct.
I think that happens a lot. I just feel bad that for him, it really is about his physical appearance that he stuck out in his own way. And for this movie, it's great, right? Like, by the time they get to 3 and he's fully zombied out, that'll really only make sense because of how degraded the corpse is, right? They don't really need to do it. Like in the first movie, in the first movie, he's still intimidating without a ton of makeup on his face.
There's like one or two shots where you see his eyes, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think like I don't know. I'm not gonna hold him up as like a great actor or anything like that, but I do think he definitely didn't get the opportunities he could have gotten. You know, like
exactly.
But you know what? It is cool that as much as it can be sad when someone's career doesn't take off after one of these movies, it's also kind of nice that in horror there are people who will probably pay you for a photograph for the rest of your life. You know, like
exactly.
So
and you can make money doing that. So I mean, he's in that trash fest Samurai Cop, but now that's a movie that's best known as one of the worst movies of all time, or so bad it's good. So it's like for a while there, he was kind of getting in any movie that had the word cop in it, he was automatically showing up in, but yet still in just some of the worst VHS trash and most hysterical movies. It's like he was made for bad movies, and yet somehow was intended as a bad movie, and yet became an entertaining movie to many people. So it's definitely a puzzle piece.
Yeah. So what else do you want to talk about here?
Oh, well, I guess you can give a summary of each one just with a anything at a 5-star verdict.
Oh, sure. I mean, for me, the Maniac Cop is still a 3.5-star film, almost a 4-star. I just, you know, there's a couple parts that kind of drag a little bit, but I like it. I think it's really great. I get why some people might think it's just a little too cornball for them, but I have fun with it. I enjoy it, and I like sort of the vibe and really the feeling of like that within a certain context, especially in cities, there's a real anxiety of the police in general, and so this scary figure is sort of playing off that anxiety. Maniac Cop 2, it's only a 2.5 for me because, you know, I think the action is great. There's a lot that's great about it, and I get why people love it. It just bums me out. At least the last time I watched it, it bummed me out because I was just like, you know, there's a vibe with the first one that I think this one doesn't do, and I just don't need them to redeem this character, like the idea that he was just done wrong and whatever. It's, I get that that's probably the most obvious twist to take, but I didn't need it. I didn't need that twist. And then Maniac Cop 3, that's a very surprisingly enjoyable 2-star movie. It's just not good enough to get more than 2 stars. There's just not enough there. But if it was like, if I was at a horror-thon, like an all-night thing, and Maniac Cop 3 played, I wouldn't walk out. It's fun. There's parts of it that are fun. It's just barely a movie, man. It's just not there. And it's, I'm not holding up to a high bar. I'm not saying it's barely a movie compared to like, Satan Tango or something. I'm saying it's barely a movie compared to Maniac Cop 2. It's barely a movie. So it's
pretty
fine.
Much just you take away the excitement that, like you say, it is bare bones. So
it's not annoying. It doesn't make me mad. As you said earlier, with covering the Eric Roberts stuff, I've definitely seen movies that like actively make me angry, and this is not that. But I just think the parts of it that are good highlight how much of it doesn't work.
That's very well said. These should be like free or forced or free or maybe even 2-star movies for me, because they're definitely movies that make a difference, like you say, if you watch them with a party or at a midnight screening. Because I feel like so much of this, for the most part, is done with heart, and I feel like it's slightly better than most low-budget B movies. I got to give them 4 out of 5. But like you say, I would never rank them as like genre highs, or even compare them to a mainstream theatrical release. That they're just fun genre movies that are just very surprising for the right reasons, for all the lacking moments that are in there, like you say. And these are definitely movies that, depending on your mood that you see them in a day, just like you talked about how with part 2, I had the same deal with the Transfers movies. I love Tim Thomerson as a actor, but those movies I notice vary based on, not only their quality, but also on the days or times you watch them. And these are definitely these kind of movies. If you watch them late at night, you're going to have fun. But if you watch them just like, I think that's also why they just never played them on TV. There was just so much excess violence. Don't get me wrong, they're not excessive like Hellraiser, but at the same time, they are just they probably just got that general nature. They're just like, yeah, this is not going to play well on general cable, and the pay channels have totally changed their type of programming that they're interested in. So it's definitely something you're going to find at a video store, used or ready to buy, and you may or may not want to pull the trigger on it. It's going to pretty much just be up to the viewer. So if you like Evil Dead or Terminator, you might want to check it out. And if you don't like those for whatever reason, then you're definitely not going to like this. So I mean, like you say, watch at your own risk. Otherwise, just don't bother.
I feel you, man. I feel you.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot more effort put into the better moments of 1 and 2, and just part 3 is just like, if there wasn't any action, it would be absolutely useless. So, but that's what I was noticing, is like, it gets boring in like the last 10 minutes because it's just so fucking predictable. So it's kind of one of those, it's a rarity, and yet it could have been so much of a better franchise, and yet had it been a better franchise, it still would have been just one of those multiple ones made with multiple different filmmakers that just, again, well, why encourage another franchise that serves as just the source of argument like Star Wars is today, So, and the last thing we need is angry fanboys raving it or bashing something on the internet when there's already enough of that. There's already enough hate in the world, so I would not play a what if game with these kind of movies. I think they did what they needed to do, and at the same time they overstayed their welcome, so they quickly evaporated off the face of the earth. So yes, you can find these on most streaming stuff. You can find these on YouTube, guys. So since everybody's always finding cult stuff on YouTube, that's pretty much the perfect place for you to find it. And if you like what you see, or you remember uncle or video hound friend who saw it, you can take their advice and check it out. But who knows? It might even make you a fan of action horror movies if you aren't already. So there's that to consider too. Would you recommend anyone watch these if they are just getting into the genre, or would you recommend they only check them out if they're hardcore fans? So that's the quandary. That's the predicament.
I would definitely recommend the first one to people who want to, especially if you're someone who doesn't mind if their horror films have a little bit of like action. Like there's a little bit of a New Yorkiness to it, but like I said, it doesn't have the fun and the grit of some other New York movies because a chunk of it was filmed in LA to save money. So, it's cool. I like it, but I don't think it's an essential. If you're someone who is just getting in and you want to see the most important things first, I think you could skip it. But I think at some point it should be on your watch list if you're getting deeper into the genre. I think it's an important moment in a lot of ways. I just personally think you could skip the sequels.
That's fine. If you like anything else by Cohen, you can see what he did on a B-movie grade scale, like when he was truly just going with the lowest of the low kind of stuff and making it slightly better. Obviously, if you're a Campbell completist, you're going to see this eventually. I would recommend this only if you're just like a hardcore fan. Now, if you're an easily entertained audience, you might have fun with this. It's definitely a 2 a.m. kind of movie for me. It's definitely not something I would watch with a general crowd. They'd be like, what the fuck is this shit? You're making me watch, Cam. So it's funny that you mentioned that. It is a talked about movie, and it's definitely one that you would see a convention guest who had appeared in those kinds of movies eventually that would be listed on their flyers, like the star of Maniac Cop and this movie and this movie, that's also a good point. I kind of like it when genres cross over, even years before Tarantino was kind of doing it. But yeah, there are definitely people who kind of prefer that one genre stay in their corner. I like all the genres on a good day. So I think it's kind of cool that it mixed horror with action. But yeah, if you're strictly want only action but no horror, or horror but no action, then I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Funny enough, some of the people in the former horror podcast I was talking about mentioned how it was funny. Her husband liked this movie and she thought it was an absolute trash fest. So because that's exactly it. She liked just pure horror and nothing else. So yeah, that is an interesting quandary. Yeah, I would take this if you are out of movies to watch and you just want to see this movie that people occasionally talk about. But even if they haven't talked about it, I think you should just go in, and the less you know about it, the better, because spoilers for it will pretty much degrade any other enjoyment you want to know about it. So that is very well said. So now that we've wrapped this up, Liam, want to plug your social media?
Oh, sure. I would recommend people go ahead and follow Cinepunx. That's CINEPUNX. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We also have a group that you can join called the Cinepunx Funtime Hangout group on Facebook, where we try to keep people updated about new episodes of the various podcasts and writing and whatever. And we also just post like random cool stuff that we like. So, if you're into all that, that's cool. You can also just check us out at cinepunx.com, CINEPUNX.com, and where we have a whole family of podcasts that are part of the network. And we have a bunch of writing, and with October coming up, we're going to feature a lot more horror stuff pretty soon.
Very cool. And anything else with your podcast you want to just kind of plug a bit, or?
No, not particularly. I don't know. We have a new episode of Horror Business coming out soonish. Not sure when it'll be ready, but we talked to director Dean Kopsalis, who has that new movie, The Swerve, and he wanted to discuss The Tenant and Sisters. So that's what we covered. Cinepunx, I don't know when the next episode's coming out. We're on a bit of a delay. And Cinema Smorgasbord, we're every Monday. Every Monday a new episode's out. Doug is a taskmaster. So we're out here every week producing stuff. So, if you're looking for something in your feed that's always going to be in your feed, check that out. We cover a wide variety. We're doing Jackie Chan movies. We're doing Eric Roberts movies.
Shit, yeah.
We're doing a director series. We're doing Carol Kane movies. We're doing a series where we look at old genre fests and sort of pick movies that won awards at those fests. So there's a bunch of stuff we're doing, and we're always coming up with new ideas. The point is not necessarily to do everything, but it's just a fun excuse to get to cover a wide variety of stuff.
Right. See how the performer evolved over time and just celebrate or talk shit about some of their lesser, resume entries. So I'll definitely need to invite you back for some of the episodes where we rank actors' 10 best roles.
Sure.
And keep in mind, for those, this is going to be interesting because I'll have to keep reminding everyone. It's like, okay, once again, you have to separate the actor from the movie. Are they good in this movie, or is it a good movie? But it's a role that anyone could have played, and of course, that's why I had to be very picky about who I chose, because there's just some people they cannot do it. It's like, and fortunately, our first Humphrey Bogart episode went rather well. It's like, okay, none of us even brought up Casablanca. We both love it to death, but we just had to kind of just reluctantly just say, that role could have been played by any leading man of that era, and it would have been perfect in our opinion. So it's just like, we gotta agree to disagree. If anyone's gonna say, how dare you not mention Casablanca, and you brought up Bogart in the same sentence. So this has been a lovely time. It's probably the most detailed discussion we'll ever have on this franchise. Everyone pretty much previously who had covered these. Well, it's a shame. Everyone who covered it previously only wanted to either talk about like Bruce Campbell or Zadar, or just what they loved or hated about the movie, and it just never got detailed. And so hopefully for those listening, we dissected it a bit and we just kind of peeled it away.
Don't get me wrong, I love Bruce Campbell in that movie, but there's other stuff to talk about too.
Yeah, I mean, if you just only focus on one element, then is it really that good a movie? Or
Right. Well, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and you're welcome back anytime. Once again, everyone knows where to follow Liam. So, much like Neeson, he has a special set of skills.
I appreciate that.
Thanks again, bud.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a